Let me introduce to you Rosalind Creasy. She is a Los Altos resident and is a garden and food writer, photographer, and landscape designer with a passion for beautiful vegetables and fruits. She published her first book in 1982, and it's called The Complete Book of Edible Landscaping, and recently, actually just released her new book called Edible Landscaping, which is just a revision.
Show and tell.
I love the picture on the cover. So this is her. Yes, exactly. She has written about 17 books, so that's a lot. She actually, her first book helped popularize the word or the phrase edible landscaping, which is just amazing. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Rosalind Creasy.
Thank you. One of the magic words that Mira said was Girl Scouts. And having been a Girl Scout for many, many years, my mom was a Scout leader, I was a Brownie leader, and I did Brownie camp in Los Altos, and so forth. So anyway, what's happened to our colors here? Trust me, they're not black.
Yeah, they are not.
Anyway, I'm going to chat for a few minutes while she figures that problem out. But anyway, okay. So the next speaker is going to speak on water saving, but so am I. And while most people don't realize it, when you grow a head of lettuce, for instance, just a few heads of lettuce, a head of lettuce, when it's grown commercially, will use up to 7 and 8 times as much water as when you grow it yourself. And if you use drip irrigation, it's even much, much less. So what happens is that if you drive, when you drive down I-5 or 101 and you go south and you go through the fields of lettuce and you see those giant 50-foot plumes of water and the wind's blowing at 20 miles an hour, half of that water is wasted. But much more than that. When you harvest a head of lettuce yourself, you don't just go and harvest a head of lettuce. You start by harvesting the leaves around the outside when they're little. And so 18 heads of lettuce will give you enough for 3 or 4 salads. If you just go after it's been in the ground about 3 or 4 weeks, you now have the leaves. The farmer comes in and he harvests 1 whole head. And so you've already gotten 3 or 4 times more lettuce out of what you planted. I mean, if anybody wants a project, Girl Scouts or whatever, and you want to see what it takes nowadays, how much water or how little water you can use to grow your own lettuce is totally amazing. The other issue is that what you don't realize is when they are harvesting lettuce, they drive these huge 18-wheelers into the field, and then they have these cut-off cars that are behind them, the rig behind, and it's filled with water. And the reason for that is they have to cool the lettuce down within 5 or 10 minutes or it wilts. So that huge, huge vat of water then gets taken. Of course, it takes a lot of petroleum to get that to your cleaning place, and then it's washed and washed and washed, sorted, and then it goes to the grocery store, and then what do? They have that little squirt thing that comes out every 20 minutes or so. So the fact of the matter is they use incredible amounts of water to grow lettuce. So you can save all that water, so you can feel like every time you harvest a little salad for yourself, you've really done justice to California water. All right. I generally start out by telling people how I got into edible landscaping. It started with my dad. He gave me my first vegetable garden when I was 5 years old. It was right off of his. For all I know, it was to keep me out of his hair. I don't know. I didn't care. He gave me some extra bean seeds. He gave me some tomato plants. He gave me a few extra strawberry runners. And he said, okay, here, this is your garden. So I thought it was like my dollhouse. So the next day I'd come out and I'd move and say, oh, that looks better over here. That looks better over here. And I don't remember ever harvesting anything from that garden. I also never remember him coming over and saying, you know, if you move them, they die. So, what I learned was that I enjoyed being out in the garden, having things in the ground, and interacting with him and in a relaxed state. So to me, gardening has this wonderful, warm association. All right, we moved forward a few years. I married and actually ended up marrying a physicist who happened to be a computer programmer way back in the 1960s. And we were in Boston. And IBM, at that point, hired him. And they started sending him all over the world because there were very few physicists that knew anything about computing and very few computer people who knew anything about physics, anything scientific. And so he ended up, he would go, for instance, to Milan and then go out to the university and work with the physicists there, giving them programs, what to use, and so forth. To make a long story short, I ended up going with him on many, many of these trips. So I figured out that by the time I was 32, I'd been to 23 countries. Wow. Very unusual in the 50s, 60s, well, 60s and 70s. What did I do when I was there? Well, I was interested in gardening, and I was very, very interested in cooking. After we got married, we lived in Cambridge, and in Cambridge, that's where Julia Child, right out of the movie. I was right there, going through the book, one page after another. So was Joyce Chen. She had a Chinese cookbook, and so I learned Chinese food. So I was very interested in food, very interested in gardening. So when my husband would go off for the day to work, I would end up going out to the markets, or nurseries, or seed companies, or agriculture departments, and basically ended up that I was a pleasure to have along. A lot of the other wives never got to go back because they'd go to the high-end stores and come back with bags full of things that had to go, cost the credit card company through the credit card companies and so forth. But because I always went and did something very inexpensive, like 6 a.m. trip to the Rome produce market, I got to go along. And the other wonderful thing that happened was that I became the official hostess for a lot of these situations. There'd probably be 4 or 5 Americans and maybe a few spouses, 4 or 5, say, Egyptians or Greeks or whatever, wherever we were. And basically, we ended up going out to dinner together. And they'd spoken about computing all day. They were bored with that, right? Well, I would say, you know what? I was at the produce market and I saw fava beans with pink flowers. And I didn't have anybody to translate, but they said they were eating the stalks. Do we eat the stalks? Do you know? No? Do you know? And so then it would be a whole conversation about their food and their favorites. Anyway, after a few years we had moved to California, moved to Los Altos in 1969. And so I've been gardening here ever since. Had a huge vegetable garden with a friend because I didn't want to have a vegetable garden in the front yard in Los Altos, God forbid. The neighbors would all get bent out of shape. And so we did it in her backyard. But after a while I got frustrated. I wanted a lot of things that were really close by, and I didn't want to run over there. She's near El Camino, I'm near the post office, so I didn't want to run over there for a few leaves of basil. So, make a long story short, I took out the front yard, put in a vegetable garden, and the neighbors didn't faint. One gentleman came by. If you were here in the audience right now, I wouldn't be able to say it, but he came over and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm putting in a vegetable garden." He said, "What do the neighbors think?"